All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of the ESSER Federal Data Collection webinars. Today, we will be recording, and so just a couple things to keep in mind. If you have questions, please enter them into the chat, and we will address them as we go. You are welcome to unmute and interject a question. Just speak clearly so your colleagues can hear the question. All right. And if you do, you can also use the raise your hand function if you would like to articulate a question to us. Right. Just a little bit of overview of what we plan to be covering today. So we will provide a brief overview of the ESSER federal data collection. We'll review timelines for completion. We'll walk through FAQs that we have been receiving, and then we're going to devote most of our time to fielding questions you may have. So you might recall we have gone through in our previous sessions and gone through each section of the data collection. So this will be more of a review, hitting those frequently asked questions, and then taking any questions that you might have. So just a reminder too, where our information is coming from. So this information is coming from the Federal Register as well as the ESSER and GEAR FAQ. We also have ESSER guidance documents that are available on the OPI website. Just a disclaimer, as we do with all things related to ESSER, the contents of this document do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the public in any way. And the information is subject to change as additional information is released by the U.S. Department of Education. And so if you started early with us, you've already experienced some of that. So I think in our first webinar, we were shooting for a submission due date of January 31st, which would be next Monday for this data collection. In the second week of January, we actually heard from the Department of Education that they were going to extend that deadline for states, and that allowed us to extend the deadline to you to March 18th, and we'll hit that in just a few minutes. But before we get too in depth, just want to briefly take a moment to introduce each of the presenters and participants here from OPI today. So I am Jeff Kirksey. I am the ESSER program manager. I worked with a lot of you as we field all things ESSER related questions, and happy to continue doing that. Chris, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Chris Noel, and I am the Data Operations Manager for the Montana Office of Public Instruction. And that means that I oversee the team that does the majority of the work on our federal reporting, preparing all of the data that you submit through our various data collection avenues back to the federal government and other people like the Board of Public Ed. And Sam is a member of my team, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Sam. I'm new to the OPI, new to the data team, but I'm a project manager, and I worked on this project by creating the tools that you are using to input your data. Thanks.
Great. Okay, thank you, ladies. I'll drive here for a little while and just as we get through the review and FAQ, and then we'll be watching that chat box for any questions that you have, as well as we'll be looking for any hand raises for people who want to pose a question. You should all be able to recite this chapter and verse now, but these funds, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, also known as ESSER, came to us in 3 rounds of funds that were authorized by Congress in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. First was ESSER Fund, ESSER 1, also known as the CARES Act. Next was ESSER 2, also known as the Carissa Act. ESSER 3, or ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act. And the fourth was and is EANS, the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools. That's for our colleagues in private education as well as our homeschooling families. So let's get into some of the questions as a bit of an orientation to why we're doing this. So it's always good to start with why. Why must we submit a data collection for ESSER funds? So the three congressional acts that establish the ESSER program, which we just talked about, and they're listed here again, charge the U.S. Department of Education with the responsibility of monitoring funds to ensure appropriate use. So that's the first reason, is the federal government is required to monitor these funds, and the U.S. Department of Education determines what measures they will actually be looking at and which data they want to collect in order to ensure that the funds are monitored. Second, the data provides a tool for measuring funding effectiveness. So that's both for the U.S. Department of Education, but that's also for us in your local schools as well. So you can take this data that you're collecting, and some of it I think probably will be helpful for you as you determine how to continue to use your ESSER funds. And then finally, just a reminder, in applying for the funds in e-grants, all those assurances that you signed off in the submission of your e-grant application, all districts that did that agreed to provide requested data to the U.S. Department of Education. So what types of information is being collected? So these are the 6 areas that we have reviewed over the last 3 weeks, but expenditure details are being collected, safe school reopening and infrastructure information, the 20% set aside for lost instructional time details, hiring, retention, and full-time equivalency data, home, internet, and technology information, as well as equitable support for learning recovery and acceleration data. So if you need some good insight into each one of these, I encourage you to go onto our website and look under the guidance tab and under the ESSER District Resources subtab, and you will find links to all of these PowerPoints as well as the recordings of all of our prior webinars. All right. So what time period does this data collection cover? And this is a question that we get pretty frequently. So this is covering the federal fiscal year from October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021. This is for both fiscal and programmatic data that you are collecting in this data collection process. So, and how should my data be broken down? So you'll notice if you are a system that actually shepherds 2 districts, you will have a separate data collection tool and login for each of your LEAs for each district, and data should be reported by LEA. And we can discuss that a little further if you need to. Our county superintendents who are reporting for multiple school districts will also do a separate collection for each district. So when must this collection be complete? So it is now the due date for all sections of the data collection to be submitted to OPI by March 18th, 2022. So each of those 6 sections we looked at, you can complete each one of those independently, and you can complete those at any time, but they must all be submitted by the 18th of March, 2020. Will there be additional technical support? Yes, as needed. So this is the last webinar, kind of overviewing the data collection process that we'll do. Again, all of these are recorded and available on our website, but we'll continue to monitor questions that are coming in. And if needed, we'll provide office hours in February to address any new frequently asked questions. So if we are going to do those additional technical support sessions, we will let you know about that in the ESSER bulletin. And so be watching your ESSER bulletin for any new technical support opportunities. I do see a question here. Let's pause and take this question.
Oh, the question, the one that's in the question and answer?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah, perfect. I was just typing an answer.
Okay. All right.
That's fabulous.
Well, Chris, why don't you finish typing, and then once you submit it, why don't you talk us through what you put in? So.
Yeah, I can talk through what I typed in there and then hit enter. I just
okay. That sounds great.
The question that Lori asked in the chat is that, you know, we were very careful to clarify that we're really just looking at base expenditure, or the expenditure of base dollars. And unfortunately, it was not clear enough that the 20% set aside is a 20% of your base. And so those two things were tracked separately in eGrants to help you to keep track of that, because we knew that the government would be asking us to report specifically on how that 20% was used. And so my sincere apologies that was not clear enough. The answer, Lori, to your question is that yes, the 20% is considered part of the base. We will actually go back and make sure, I think Sam can hear me right now, we can make a note to go back and make sure to update that so that nobody else has that same confusion. I really appreciate you asking the question. And it is something that's a little bit complicated. And again, we talked about this in the expenditure one. The ESSER 1 funds, when they came, we knew very little about all of the future decisions that would be made by the federal government around these other acts that happen. And so there are some places where it's just a little bit messy how we talk about it, which, you know, in the long run, we hope that we can clean that up. But in the short term, we definitely do want you to report on that 20% as part of your base.
Yes, indeed. And that we hit that in one of the FAQs here in a minute, because you're not alone in asking that question, Lori. So the data collection related question related to the data collection, where do I go to access the data collection tool? So you would have received a link for this in the email that was sent to your authorized representative on the 13th of December. But if you don't have that, you can actually go to the ESSER website. So if you just go to the homepage, OPI homepage, there's a red button right underneath the picture of the superintendent that says ESSER information. You click that button, that takes you right here to the ESSER page. And there on the ESSER page, down below kind of the key dates and OPI technical assistance, you'll see the webinar that we're doing right now. And then with the due date for the district federally mandated data collection, you click on that hyperlink, the federally mandated data collection, and it will take you right to the collection tool. So where can I find my district login information? I'll get that. I'm not a pirate. I'll get that fixed. Your district login information was sent to your authorized representative representative in an email from me. And if you're one of those people that oversees multiple districts, you would have gotten separate emails for each one of your districts from me. And those were sent on December 13th, 2021. So if you need to search your email inbox, you can either do it from using my email address or using the date December 13th, 2021. If you cannot locate this information, you can please email esser-opi@montana.gov, and myself, Chris, and Sam, we all monitor that account. And so one of us can get back to you and get you your login information. So this is what the data collection tool looks like when you click on that link to actually go to the data collection itself. You would click on the data collection tool button here, but there are also some really helpful links that if you click the center button, it would take you to this page, which provides a video overview of the entire data collection, which Chris has graciously done for us. There are worksheets for each of the sections that you can print off as a PDF or download as a PDF that you can distribute to your colleagues as a way of helping you collect that information. If various people within your school are helping with that data collection process, you can farm it out a little bit that way by using those worksheets. And then there's a link to the actual federal document. I do encourage you to take a look at that because I think it will give you appreciation for what my colleague Sam and colleague Chris have done for you in this process. In breaking the total collection down into these 6 kind of separate working areas, and you'll see that there is information that is requested in the federal data collection document that we're not asking for. It's because OPI already has that information, and we don't need to ask you for information we already have. And so we want to save you some redundancies in the process. But you know, if you want to see what the federal government gives us to work with, it's a great thing to go look at, and maybe it gives you a little bit more appreciation for the work we're trying to do to support you here at the OPI. So a couple other frequently asked questions we get, and Lori brought up was a great case in point is, so what is the 20% set aside and how is this reported? So just a reminder, lost instructional time are allowable uses that must be evidence-based interventions to promote learning acceleration or emotional well-being, sort of the social emotional well-being. And this is a category specifically for ESSER 3. So this doesn't apply to ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 funds, it's specifically ESSER 3. And as we just discussed, while we have delineated this funding for you in e-grants, just as a way for you, you to help keep that organized in your mind, it is part of your base allocation from the federal government for ESSER 3. So, all right. I'm gonna do, I think I have one more FAQ and then we'll transition to, Lori's got a few more questions that are good ones for us to go through. But I wanted to clarify, this actually came up in, I think, our first webinar, and it was, can districts reimburse themselves with ESSER funds for ESSER allowable expenses after a fiscal year has closed? So, just to clarify on this, and Jolene, if you're on, this was a question that you had asked, and I promised to get back to you. So So yes, this is permissible for allowable uses expenses back to March 13th, 2020. So that can be funded with ESSER dollars. The reason it's that date, that is the day that the federal state of emergency was declared. And so that's why it can go back to expenditures dating as early as the 13th of March 2020 and thereafter. But if you have already closed your fiscal year, your district will need to complete a prior period adjustment. And my colleagues in the school finance team can help assist you with that. So if that is something you are needing to do, you can reach out to us and we'll get you connected with our colleagues in school finance. So, all right. Okay, let's get into some of these questions. So, oh, there you are, Jolene. Great. So, at long last, you have the answer to your question. So, all right. All right. Let me go ahead and read Lori's question. So there are several questions about programs, whether they were eligible to all students, and the breakdown of students in the programs. My district did not identify any groups of students to have been more impacted than any other group. So here are the questions. Should the district answer no to all the questions asking, is the above program eligible to all students? And since no individual student groups were identified, Chris, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, actually, I am so sorry, Lori. When I was reading this question, I realized that I typed this answer up for you and I just found it stuck in my outbox. And so I am so sorry about that. By way of explanation, I am traveling right now. I have traveled to the Midwest to take care of my mom who just had surgery. And I think that it might have been during a service issue. And so I feel terrible, but I'll answer that question here for everyone and then make sure my email sends if you need me to. You should say, yes, this was available to all students. Because you didn't identify any student groups, you effectively are saying that every program that we offered was available to all students. All they want to know is whether you limited access. And so the bigger question is, if I did identify a student group and it was available to everyone in that group, but not to anyone else, then I should say it was available to only my identified groups. If I didn't identify a group and I didn't limit anything for a program, then I should be saying, no, yes, this was available to all students. Anybody who wanted to participate could. Now, the second part, Lori had asked that question. I want you to say, yes, it was available to all students and put 0 for the number of students that it could hold. That is something that we looked at how to make it skip that for you in the logic, and it just couldn't work because of the nature of the follow-ups. And so it is a little bit weird there that you've basically said, no, we didn't offer this program. And then we ask, was it open to everyone? And you're like, well, yeah, but I didn't offer it. And so we get it that that's a little bit weird. The language there is weird, but please, if you weren't limiting it, just say, yes, it was open to everyone there. We will on the back end, we are looking at that question of, are there people saying this wasn't available and then giving a number of students it was available to? Obviously, we recognize that's not ideal, but there just wasn't a way with the dependencies in the larger question set to make it skip that for you. And so my apologies. Right. Hopefully that makes sense though.
All right.
Perfect, thanks.
All right, Lori says, got it, thank you. Awesome, thanks, Lori. Okay. Other questions that you have. This is now your time to ask the questions that you have. You can either do that through the Q&A or in the chat box, or you can raise your hand to be recognized. So. Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there anything and this is to you and Sam both. Is there anything as you see reports coming in or collections coming in, anything that you want to kind of remind folks about, and then looks like Jim has dropped in a question, but I'll defer to you first, and then I'll take a look at Jim's question here.
I think that Jim, I have a clarifying question. I think that you're asking what to do if the expenditures happened, but they were after the 30th of September. But I just want to clarify, because I think there might be, I just want to make sure we're reading it right. So in terms of things for people to think about and remember, I think things to remember, my big ones are the expenditures, the FTE, and the one that asks you to count the activities, I'm blanking right now on the title of that one. Sam might be able to come up with it. There's a lot of them, but those three are the ones that take the longest. And so I just recommend that if people are kind of dividing things up or doing them, working through them one at a time, that, the safe school reopening, it's pretty quick and easy. The 20% for lost instructional time is pretty quick and easy, and the home internet is pretty quick and easy. I would really encourage people to think about those other three as the bigger lift, and to make sure that you've kind of scheduled time out for that. As we have so much time between now and when it's due now in May, I think that would be the other thing that I would say, is that, waiting until the last minute feels attractive. It would mean, that you can finish getting through this. Many schools are trying to finalize grades and get started with a second semester for our secondary schools. All schools doing that, going through that process, and that means that we'll be seeing parent-teacher conferences coming up again now soon too. And so just kind of keeping track of the idea that we may have questions about your data, and the sooner you can get it in, the better, the more likely it is that nobody's scrambling. But we really haven't seen any major issues yet in what has come in, or at least not anything that we've caught. So hopefully that's helpful. Oh, okay. So the expenditures happen before the 30th, and they just don't fit the categories that the federal government chose to break it down in this report. Jeff, that one I'm going to give to you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yes. So if they don't fit in any of the expenditure categories, I believe there's also a box for other. Is that correct? Yeah, so maybe Sam or Chris, if one of you could pull up the expenditure tool, and let's just take a look at it. Because I believe there is a place that you can report other. Here, I'll stop sharing. So one of you can share.
I can pull it up, but my computer is running very slowly, so it will take a minute. If Chris is able to get it quicker, she can do it.
Yeah, sure. I'm pulling it up, and then my one question is going to be, I'm going to share my screen. It's a little bit tricky to model, as many of the people who are filling this out know. You have to enter everything to move between the screens, and so I'm going to pull it up from the back end so that we can look at the individual sections.
Awesome.
That way we don't have to type all of that fake information in today.
Nice. I do see our colleague Trennan is here as well. Dr. Bayless, nice to see you today.
I made it. I was a little late, but I made it. So it's good to be here. Sorry about the time.
No, you are good.
So this, for everybody, you can see the lovely back end of the interface here. And so on the expenditures, I'm going to just preview this individual section so that we can look at it. And what we see here is that we can see this one happens to be supporting health and physical safety. And we can see on the individual one here, there is other health protocols not listed above. So there is this kind of other catch-all that fits within the category of health and safety. If we look at the meeting students' social emotional needs, we again kind of have a variety of things here. And I thought there was something in this one as well that was a catch-all or a place where you could fit other in. And so there's a lot of these, I would say here, that if we're saying that it's in this category, there's some of these that are designed to just really take everything. This one does not happen to have that other category built in. But as you look through each of these, you can see other activities not described above that are necessary to maintain operation of the school. So I think the big idea then is that we do need to get it into one of the big picture categories, but within each of those, there is kind of a place that allows you to situate it as an other expense in that category. Does that feel broad enough to resolve this specific concern?
Does that make sense to you, Jim? All right, great,
Okay.
thanks.
There are
Hope
specifics that you wanted. You could send an email if there was a specific
Mhm.
expense that you still were struggling to categorize, and we could go in and look. But
Yep.
unfortunately, they didn't make a big broad other. It's just
Yeah.
those targeted others within each category.
Yep, yes, indeed. So, yep, and hope things are well out and brought us there for you, Jim. So, all right. Any other questions today? We'll wait a couple minutes just to see if anybody is typing.
Jeff, you had asked me something about things that we've seen in the data set coming in. Sam just sent a message saying that her entire internet went down, and that's what she
Okay.
out of the call, just so nobody's worried about her. She's fine. It's just her internet. But when you asked about things that we've been seeing in the data that's coming in, the reports that have been completed, we're not really seeing any issues yet in that, which is good. I will say that there are some districts who have not necessarily yet updated their initial plan, because in the process of that submission, they haven't hit their 6 months yet. If you are either one of those schools who has not yet updated, or you, as you're reviewing this data, you're thinking, actually, I need to change some things in my plan. There's some things that I recognize I maybe could be doing or should be doing or would like to do, or there's, I'd like to do a budget amendment. This data is a great jumping off point to think about those things, to make those types of changes. Those of you who have not yet submitted that plan revision, or if you already did your plan revision and you're looking towards your next one, this is the kind of data that you might bring to your board and say, here's a look at the data that we submitted to the OPI. And this is what we're seeing in terms of how we've spent this. That can then be your public process of review as you're thinking about your next edit. And so really, I just want to take this opportunity to encourage people to think about how we can tie these activities together and not think of them as separate, but kind of dovetail the work so that we're doing that update as we submit our data. In 6 months, we do it again. A year from now, we can do another update along with our data submission, and we kind of can get in that cycle. And so this is a great opportunity for that, especially for those districts that are due for that update.
Right.
Yes, Jim is asking if ESSER 2 mandatory subgrant funds are the supplemental or base allocations. The mandatory subgrant is the base allocation. If your district, in general, the supplemental funds were most often used so that no district got such a small allocation that it wasn't enough funding to do something with. And so small districts had their allocations supplemented in that way to get them up to a point where they would be able to make meaningful purchases or changes with that funding. And so small districts, you have seen that, you know, the difference between your base and your supplemental. That is the language clarification for everyone.
Right. And specifically for this reporting, we are asking you to report on your base allocation. The only place that gets a little confusing is actually in ESSER 3, because lost instructional time is also base funding. So because what we're talking about when we're talking about base funding, we're talking about funding that came directly to you from the federal government. If you do have school district supplemental funds, those are actually ESSER funds that came to the state for the state to use at their discretion, and the state actually chose to send out supplemental funds to districts. And so we, and if we need any clarity from you regarding supplemental funds, we will reach out separately about that. But we actually think we can actually garner most of that information through e-grants, and so that's our intent. That's why we are limiting our focus to base. And that brings up a really good question about co-ops. Generally, co-ops are not receiving base funding. So the funding that co-ops have been receiving generally comes through the related services funding in ESSER 1 and the I think it's special education funding in ESSER 2. And so those are actually both state allocations as well too. So that those are funds that those are ESSER dollars that the state had discretion to distribute, and so we distributed it in those ways. And so generally co-ops are not receiving base funding allocations, and so therefore do not need to complete this data collection tool. So the only exception would be is if a school district is funded their co-op through their ESSER base allocation, then the school district is actually responsible for collecting that information from the co-op. I got an email from my friend Deb Glass out there in Lame Deer, and Deb had asked me about, you might remember before EANS came into effect, there in ESSER 1, there was an what is the word? I'm blanking. It's like an equitable services clause into where you may have given a portion of your base funding to private school or homeschool in your area. And if that's the case, that was your base funding, and you do need to report on that as well. And so it'd be generally schools have that information because spending records, because it is a pass-through. All of those funds are processed through you. Just don't forget that that needs to be included as well, because that's all in your base funding for ESSER 1. And ESSER 1 is the only one like that, because once ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 came out, the EANS program had launched. And so all of that was captured through EANS funding. I see a question here. Did I understand you to say that we are giving the ESSER 2 special needs money to our co-op? You don't have to. A number of schools, school districts have done that, but those special needs funds just have to meet. It just have to be used to benefit students with special needs, and so a lot of our school districts have done that through channeling those funds towards their co-op. Other school districts have enhanced services that are available there within the district. So, it is not a have to at all. So, but thanks for that question. And no, Lori, the answer to your question, Lori had asked, ESSER 2 had some funding and special needs. Should those funds be included in the expenditure report? What about ESSER related services funds? Do they need to be reported in this report anywhere? And the answer is no, because those are actually funds that were actually allocated through the state, and we're in a direct allocation from the federal government. And so we're collecting that information on the back end. So you just focus on your base category. So. Okay. Any other questions out there today? I think somebody should pose a question to Sam right now. No, Sam is working from home, so that's why she's out. So
Yeah, I just sent her a question to ask if she was okay, but
okay,
answer.
Yes. Yes, and Chris is joining us live from the Midwest. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
No, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my light here.
Hey, that's all right. You've got sunshine. That's good. So. Okay. I'm just going to transition back to sharing my screen for a moment, just as we wrap up, but feel free to ask those questions if you still have them. But I did want to, just a reminder, we are updating our website frequently. And so we actually just made some updates today. There is also a live feed there for if you are looking for any of the ESSER bulletins, they are housed. Once they are sent, they get archived here on the website, so you can go back and look at the ESSER bulletin. But our site's really easy to get to. It's right out, there's a button right off the main page off of that opi.mt.gov website. Look for the Find ESSER Information button. It's right under the picture of Superintendent Artson, and that was where you can go to find all sorts of information. Just want to remind you that the webinar recordings are available to you, and we should have this one posted by the end of the day tomorrow. It usually takes us about 24 hours to get the video turned around and posted, but this webinar will join the others. It is on the ESSER webpage, and then if you scroll down to the guidance tab, you'll see a sub tab that says ESSER District Resources. You click on that tab and scroll down and find the data collection resources, and that is where you'll find all of these webinars and their supporting PowerPoint presentations. So And by all means, if you have questions as you go, which I'm sure you will, feel free to reach out to me at the phone number that's there, as well as to me and my colleagues at the ESSER-OPI@mt.gov email address. As mentioned earlier, there are a number of us that monitor that email address and can get back to you quickly. So I'll take one last pause for any questions. Any last burning questions? Oh, we have one. Right. Oh, yes. So Lori asks, does the survey save as I'm going along? And yes, it does. So it does save. So do you want to talk about, like, if you need to go back and edit your survey, what that process looks like, Chris?
Yeah, so if you, the survey does save as you go along, but because it has requirements to fill in answers, you can't submit it as you go. You have to just trust that it's saving. So what Qualtrics does is it saves in the background what your IP address is. And as long as you re-access the survey from the same IP address, you will access it at the same point. In fact, some of you have been very frustrated by that feature, because when you try to submit a second report, it takes you straight to the end of your first report, and you have to actually use an incognito window to do it. Unfortunately, that system is not foolproof. In some cases, districts have ways in which they modify their IP addresses for security purposes that messes it up. In some cases, you worked on it at school and you want to continue at home. If that's the case, just send a message to that ESSER-OPI@mt.gov address and say, I have an incomplete submission. Can you send me my link? And what we do is we go in and we have to go in the background and pull the link out. Unfortunately, that's just the way they've designed their system. But at any time, we're always happy to do that. We recognize that that is something that you cannot access for yourself, and so we can easily pull it for you. When we do that, we manually force a submission even though the fields are empty, and then send you the link to update that submission that we forced closed.
And what about folks that have submitted and realize that they want to make some changes to what they've submitted?
Yeah, so if you've submitted and realized you want to make some changes, you should be having an email address in your inbox. That email sends to both the AR on record and to the person who submitted. So for those of you that have a weird thing going on with your AR email addresses, it's still going into the submitter email that you've typed in. So you're still receiving that. If by some chance you didn't receive it, or you received it and you click the link and it doesn't work, just email us and we'll send that link to you. Sometimes we can track through and figure out why it wasn't working or why you didn't get the email, and other times it just, technology is funny and things get missed. And so we're just always happy to re-forward those emails. We also receive a copy of every one of those emails, so we can actually just forward you the copy that we received.
Yeah, so after you submit, you do get an email confirmation, and in that email confirmation of your submission is a link to actually go back and do any edits that you might want to do. So, but as Chris said, if you didn't get that email or can't find that email, let us know and we can get it. We can get that information to you. Right. All right, friends. Well, we appreciate your attention today. Thank you for the good attendance of these webinars. We've been really pleased with how engaged the districts have been in these webinars. And if you know colleagues that weren't on today, please point them in the direction of where they can find these recordings. I will likely do that in the ESSER bulletin next week as well too. There's also some instruction on where to find these recordings that also come out in the Compass this week as well. So okay, so with that, I think we will bid you adieu today, but we are here for you feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email with any questions you have. And again, we will be monitoring questions to see and kind of assessing if we need to do some office hours for additional technical support throughout the month of February. So, and if we do that, we will let you know through the ESSER bulletin. All right, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day. It's sunny in Helena. I hope it is where you are too. So, all right, have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for coming.